Hiya, Freya. Um, I thought about a snippet I could talk to you about um, the other day, and this one is on books, games, and toys from my past. So I'll just waffle on a bit and hope it works out okay. All right. Uh, I remember playing with various toys when I was little. One that I loved all the time for a lot of years, around about your age, right up for a few years after that, was one that my grandparents had. Well, there were two actually that my grandparents had. One was in a little tin about the size of my two hands together, and he took the lid off, and inside this tin there were little wooden pieces which were shaped as parts of animals or creatures, fantasy animals, not real animals necessarily. So there might be a body, and it had little blobby bits sticking out of it. You could stick a head on, or a tail on, or four legs on, or two legs on, or however you wanted to do it. And the other parts, the head, tail, legs, and other things, were also made of wood, and they just sort of you just sort of pushed them together and they stayed in place, which was very clever. And I don't know how old that toy was. It must have been very old because it was old when I first saw it when I was 3 or 4 years old. And I used to love that. It was just in a little tin, and there were lots of bits and pieces that you could put together. They were quite small. Each piece, the bodies were just about the size of my thumb down to there. So that tells you how small the pieces were, and they fitted inside this tin. The legs and arms and tails and heads and things were obviously smaller than the body. Well, not obviously, might not have been, but they were. And there were different types of animals, and some of them weren't real animals at all, and some of them were human heads, arms, and legs. So you could just make up what you wanted, and you could have fun creating different animals with that. I used to love doing that. Um, Another thing they had was bagatelle, and that was oh I loved that from being about 3 or 4 right up until I was a teenager. So that was a good long lasting thing, and that was a wooden board with a straight bottom base, and then it went up and it was arched at the top, and it was fixed so that you could sort of pull a little thing down and it stood at a slope. So it was sort of like that on top of the table or floor, wherever you used it. And there was a little channel at the bottom and another channel up the side. And in the bottom, there were a lot of little balls. They were silver coloured, but they were about the size of marbles, I think, a bit smaller than small marbles, bigger than a pea, smaller than a marble, just slightly smaller than a marble. And for the bit that went upwards, so they were on the bottom in the slot along the bottom, and the bit that went upward, outside the board, there was a thing you pulled back and then let it go, and it went phew and shot up one of these balls round the board, and it swirled around. Now, the board wasn't just a plain board. That would have been boring after a while. It had little areas marked out with nails tapped into the board. So you might have an area that was like a circle, and there was a gap at the top that a ball could fit into, but the gaps between the nails were too small for the ball to escape out. And inside each of those areas, there was a number, which was the score that you got if your ball went into that area. So I used to play that, trying to get the biggest score I could. And it was just a game against myself. But you could play it with two people and take it in turns and see who could get the highest score. Um, I think they have games a bit like that or they used to have games a bit like that in amusement arcades. Um, but this was at my grandparents', and it was a big green board, about, oh, I'm just working out how big it was, about a metre long and half a metre wide. Uh, so, and it just sloped, sort of that sort of slope. So when the ball shot up, it went round and it just spun around, bouncing off things until it either landed back at the bottom and went back into the bottom slot, or landed in one of the areas that were fenced off with these little nails tapped into the board. That was two things. I had At home, I had toys and things given to me for Christmas and birthdays. Um, I was never given a teddy bear until your daddy gave me one when he was a teenager, because I said, I was never given a teddy bear and I always wanted a teddy bear. But I didn't want to tell anybody I wanted a teddy bear, because that would spoil the magic of being given one without having asked for one, if you see what I mean. Um, I didn't, it wasn't a big problem for me, but I just fancied being given a teddy bear by somebody that hadn't been asked for it. So I never had a teddy bear, but I had two dolls. One my grandmother gave me, and it was just meant looked like a baby. It was about that big. You can't tell how big that is, can you? It was about a foot long, or 30 centimeters long, and it was just, like sort of baby shaped doll. It didn't do anything special. It was just for me to play with, put in a pram, and I had a pram for it as well, her as well, and walk her wherever I went. But I didn't really play with dolls very much. My parents gave me what was then called a walkie-talkie doll, and the walkie-talkie doll was taller, maybe half a metre tall. She had hair that I could brush and tie up into different hairstyles. I could have cut it. I don't think I did cut it, but I could have cut it. And it had eyes that blinked. If I lay her down, her eyes shut, and if I sat her up, her eyes opened. Or you could rock her backwards and forwards, and her eyes blinked. You couldn't make her wink though. They both did the same at the same time. And arms and legs. It was more like a child than a baby. More like a 10-year-old child to look at than a baby. And if you got her in the right position, you could sort of move her along and her legs sort of walked. So there's some sort of engineering inside her body that helped her legs walk. Or the way the legs were attached was engineered so that they looked as though they were walking, just straight legs walking. And I think, as I remember, I think both the dolls, if you lay them on the back and then brought them back up again, they made a noise like somebody crying, "Wah, wah," or "Mama," or something like that. I can't remember what they said. But I was never really into dolls. I wanted to play with the train set that my brother had, but I wasn't allowed to, or the farm set full of animals and all sorts of things and tractors and things. And I wasn't supposed to play with that, but in the end, I was allowed to play with that. So I used to play with that whenever I could, um, play with the little animals and so on. But I loved toys that you put together, like the animals in the tin that my grandmother had. We got given things like games like snakes and ladders and games like that in boxes, and we had coloured pencils and paint sets, so you could paint things and so on. And I'm trying to remember what else I had that I played with, but I can't remember. But where we kept them, this was important. where we kept them was in the house where we lived when I was a child in Leeds. We had the dining room had a bay window, like your room has. Your front room downstairs had a bay window, and your bedroom upstairs has a bay window, doesn't it? But this was just the dining room had a bay window, and somebody had made a seat out of wood that went across the bay window, and the seat was just nice height just to sit on and rest and look out the window over your shoulder, or kneel on and look out the window and watch Uncle Charlie messing about in his garden next door, and Auntie Hilda hanging the washing out and things. They were nice people. But we'd also this seat had two sides to it, and each side had its own lid. And one side was my brother Andrew. It was his side for his toys, and the other side was my side for my toys. And before Christmas or birthday, we had to decide which toys we were going to give away to children who needed them, who didn't have them, to make room for the new things. Or maybe we did that after. Can't remember. I think we probably did that after we were given new things. We made space for the new things by taking out toys that we weren't going to play with anymore and making space for the new toys. And in the evenings, when we'd finished playing with whatever we'd been playing with, we had to go and put the toys away in our toy box, not leave them spread all over the house. So my brother put his in his toy box, and I put mine in my toy box. And they seemed to sort of have enough in them but not be overflowing, because we always made space for anything new that we were given. And the toys that we took out of the boxes and didn't put back in were given to charities for children who maybe didn't have whose parents maybe didn't have enough money to buy them toys for their birthdays and things like that. I spent a lot of my time with my head in a book, a lot of my time looking at books and comics and things, magazines and so on. And I spent a lot of time playing with our little dog outside in the garden or inside in the house. And I did things like making making perfume out of rose petals in the summer. Well, I thought I was making perfume, but it always smelled horrible after a day or two, because it wasn't made properly. I didn't use the right ingredients. I just used rose petals and water and squashed them all up in a jam jar, and then left it, thinking I was making a really nice smelling perfume that would smell like the roses did. And I wasn't. I was making something that in a couple of days it started smelling horrible, and it ended up getting the liquid got thrown out, and the jam jar got washed and sterilised, ready to be used again for something. We had a sand pit outside. Don't know if I told you that. And I had things that I could play with in the sand pit. They were in my toy box, but I had to wash the sand off before I put them away. So I could make sand castles, and like you can when you're on the beach here or anywhere, and things like that. We had little bat and ball games and things like that too. I can't remember individual toys now, apart from the ones that I've explained about. So I think that's probably long enough for a snippet on toys and games and books. Books I've talked about, I think, going to the library and getting books out. And I just read and read and read. I still do when I can. I mean, I make time during my day so I can read, because I love reading. All sorts of things. And games that we played, like snakes and ladders. We had packs of cards and played snap and memory games as well. That's something my mother did, actually. My mother did with me. Sometimes she'd bring a tray in with a cloth to cover it, and she'd put a few things on the tray. And she'd take the cloth off, and I'd look at the tray, and I had to remember what was on there. And then she'd put the cloth back on, put her hand under the cloth and remove one of the things, and hide it in her pocket or somewhere where I couldn't see what it was. And then she'd take the cloth off again, and I had to tell her what was missing. So it was training my memory, like some of the memory games that you play. Um, and that got more and more complicated as I got older. So she was actually training my memory. I used to enjoy doing that. That was quite good fun. I think it's called Kim, that game. Anyway, I don't know. She called it Kim. Um, and as I got older, we got more complicated board games to play with, like Monopoly and Cluedo, things like that, which are still going strong, some of them. Um, and my cousins who lived just round the corner, not far from us, 2 or 3 minutes walk, very near indeed. Daphne, who was 7 years older than me, and Ian, who was 4 years older than me, we used to go round there and play games, or they would come to our house and play board games with us, which I didn't very often win or do well at them. And I found out later it's because they cheated. That's terrible. Don't ever do that. Play fair. Apparently, my mother cheated at games as well, I was told. Was told by your father that my mother cheated at some of the board games she played with him, so she beat him. That's not right. Anyway, we don't do that, do we, Freya? We don't cheat, we just play the game and enjoy it and have fun. So that's it for now. I'll think of something else sometime and do another snippet for you. Bye.